Welcome everyone to another Street Entrepreneurs Workshop. And today we're going to be talking about beating Goliath with Keith Camhi. And I'm very excited to be discussing this because many of you have asked me, well, but how do I compete? How do I compete with the giants that have all the funding, all the talent in the world, right? So this is a very promptly workshop for that very reason. Thank you so much, Keith, for being here with us.
It's my great pleasure.
How's your day going so far?
Keeping busy.
Awesome. So I'm going to let you take it away. I'm going to add your presentation, and you can see it.
All right, very good. You want me to just drive from here?
Yes, please.
Sounds good. All right, I'll go through, 20, 25 minutes of presentation, and then happy to take any and all questions at the end. So whatever anyone wants to ask me about. By way of introduction, my name is Keith Camhi. I'm the SVP of Accelerators for Techstars. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. Before joining Techstars, started a couple companies, one venture-backed in the fitness tech space, which is part of what I'll be talking about today. Another was a franchise rollout, and for the last several years, I've been helping other entrepreneurs succeed. And Techstars, if you don't know what we do, we're the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed by way of accelerator programs all over the world. So we run 47 or so accelerators worldwide, each taking in 10 companies a year, giving them some funding and helping them with a lot of mentorship. And we've supported over 2,000 companies lifetime to date that have gone on to raise $10 billion of venture funding and have over $30 billion of market valuation. And so anyone who's that's not what my story is about, but anyone who's interested in that, I'm happy to take questions on that on the end, where you can message me and learn more about how to be part of an accelerator. But one thing we do at Techstars, which is what I'm going to share with you today, is we tell founder stories. And we do workshops by way of often sharing a story that has some lessons learned that can be generalized. And part of the notion there is that stories are more interesting often than just a workshop. And also it's to say, hey, I've seen this movie before. I know how this one ends. Your movie may or may not be the same, but take the lessons learned that have come along the way from this one. And so I'll be telling the story of my first startup, which was the venture-backed one, and taking on a giant in the industry. And there are a handful of generalizable lessons learned from that that you can take away, and that I advise startups on in general. Also, there are a lot of things about that story that aren't covered in this particular thing about taking on an industry giant, but happy to cover any of those at the end in questions, from fundraising to founder issues to anything else. So with that, put another way, we also like quotes from more famous people than ourselves when we try to explain things. So put another way about founder stories, the idea is that it's good to learn from your own mistakes, even better to learn from other people's mistakes. So, we like to say, some of our mentorship driven accelerators, it's about seeing around corners and pattern matching. And part of that is just having been down that path before. We can help new entrepreneurs who are doing it for the first time avoid some of the mistakes that we've made, or repeat some of the good things we've done. Because while every startup is different and unique, there are some commonalities and some patterns. So if you can avoid some pitfalls that you might run into based on someone else sharing, like, hey, I tried something like that and here's what happened, it's very helpful. So let me tee up the Goliath piece, and I'll go back and forth from my own story to kind of some generalizable takeaways, and hopefully the moral of the whole thing is to give you some encouragement to go ahead and take on Goliath if you've got a killer idea, and to understand your own relative strengths in that asymmetric battle, and some specific things that you might do to go pursue that. Most of all, not give up just because someone big might be in your category. In fact, might be encouraged by someone big being in your category. But so I'll go jump back and forth between my own story and those takeaways. And I'll start by teeing up kind of the background to this company I founded called FitLinks, which was in, again, the fitness technology space. So the background to that story starts in the early 1990s, and I'm in grad school at MIT, using advanced technology by day and a golf pencil and workout card at my gym in the evening, and thinking there's got to be a better way to collect all this data. And that's not my workout card. I just grabbed that one off the internet, so don't try to see what I was lifting. But the idea here is that, as a user, as someone facing a perceived problem or lack of a solution, which is where most crazy entrepreneurial ideas are hatched. I said that, hey, I know something about technology. I know something about my user experience. We can do this better. And so the notion was, can't we kind of computerize this workout card and have the equipment track me instead of me writing everything down, and I can do interesting graphs and reports and such. And so with that, beginning of an idea, I got my actually my undergrad and my grad school roommates to come with me, the three of us, out to a trade show in San Diego to go take a look at the fitness industry. And so we wanted to see, like, it was our idea as an outside user of this stuff, validated it all by the industry of needing some technology. And so we start by kind of walking around the trade show floor out on the periphery and seeing what we thought amounted to, a lot of bent metal and marketing back in that day. So you got kind of your weight stack equipment, the life cycles were well known, and computerized cardio equipment was out there. But not much in the way of anything computerized on the strength equipment, or any notion that this stuff should be networked together. And so it was largely, bent metal and marketing. So we're encouraged as we're walking around the periphery, and then we approach the center of the trade show floor, right? So the biggest booth in there, which is the Life Fitness booth. So that's our Goliath, enter the picture. And in Goliath's booth, they're the makers of the life cycle. You got the spinning life cycles up on pedestals with smoke coming out and models showing them off. And the legendary founder of Life Fitness, a bigger than life figure, Augie Nieto, holding court in the middle of it, and everyone coming over and paying homage. And still kind of encouraged by that there's nothing much out there, until we get sort of the back of this big trade show booth, the two-story back of it, and there's a sign on the door that says new offering or new technology for club owners only, right? So you have to own a club to get to go in there. And so, being entrepreneurs, that didn't stop us. We made up the name of a club we didn't own and got access to the room. And lo and behold, behind the curtain is the Life Circuit and Life Center. So what we came to find, and I don't recall the guy in spandex there, but he was certainly part of their ads, but they've been working for years on computerizing strength equipment and developing this kiosk, the Life Center, that would tie it all together with their cardio equipment. Been working on it for a few years with IBM as their partner, and we're about to release it out to industry. And so our idea had been the idea of Goliath for several years earlier. Maybe they came up with it at the same time I was in grad school, but it was in the works and about ready to be released. And so by any math there, the right answer is as a little tiny, not even David yet, in the industry that we hadn't even started entering yet, was to run away. But yet, I can't really recall our thinking, and didn't keep a journal of it, which is a good idea to do. But whether we had an inkling of maybe we still stood a chance, or whether we just didn't like our day jobs enough by that point that we felt we needed to go do something entrepreneurial. Two of the three of us decided to press on. The third was smart enough to go become a venture capitalist, and he plays a role in this later on. But we pressed on, and the analog out to the story of David and Goliath is actually quite interesting. And there's a wonderful book on this by Malcolm Gladwell, which, if you need some more inspiration on why David shouldn't give up, go ahead and read that. It's called David and Goliath. And what Gladwell describes is that in the traditional telling of the story, the biblical telling of the story of David and Goliath, you have this sense of a massive underdog somehow miraculously winning the battle. Goliath is quoted in the Bible as saying, "Come to me that I may give your flesh to the birds of the heavens and the beasts of the field," basically taunting little David. And somehow miraculously David wins. But what some historians, and Gladwell quotes in depth, go on to explain about this battle is that actually what happened is David changed the rules of the battle. Rather than coming up close to Goliath, which he was calling him to do, come to me, David stays at a good distance, and being a person who is handy with a sling, which was a weapon of warfare then, he slung a stone between Goliath's eyes and killed him and persevered. And Gladwell goes on to describe that upon redefining the battle, David not only was no longer the underdog, he was the clear favorite to win that, because he changed the rules of the battle in which he would have lost to Goliath. And so in Gladwell's telling of the story in his book, once David decides to change the rules of the conflict, the sling is the devastating weapon here. Goliath's might is no longer relevant. It's the fact that he could launch a rock from not as pictured in the drawing there, but from 100 yards away and hit him between the eyes. David actually had the advantage. So as Gladwell would tell it, in encouraging you all to go ahead and pursue Goliath and not be scared, or be appropriately nervous, I'd say. We're misled by the narrowness of our assumptions about what constitutes an advantage in any given situation. So sometimes your nimbleness might be an advantage over Goliath's bureaucracy. So with that, that's teeing it up. That's pre-founding, and we, whether out of having the same sense that Gladwell would later document in his book, or out of pure naivete, or again just not liking our day jobs, we persevered and moved forward with starting this company. So I'm going to tell three quick examples of David and Goliath in our startup, on technology, on developing the product itself, and then on go-to-market strategy, and kind of tell you how that played out. There are obviously dozens of other stories, and we certainly didn't get everything right, but I'll give you three kind of stories, tell you a few takeaways from those, and then again, happy to open up for any questions. Number one, and I'm telling these in terms of the roadblocks that we hit as a startup, and these, you'll hit, every startup hits roadblocks. If you like the podcast that I enjoy of how I built this on NPR, it's almost every major startup that you've ever heard that's super successful almost died multiple times. Take heart in the fact that overcoming your roadblocks is a fundamental part of the day job. But I'll tell you about a few and how the David and Goliath played out. So the first one we hit, having decided that, okay, we're going to computerize strength equipment, which is weight stack equipment, and then connect cardio equipment. The first thing we hit was just trying to solve for how we would actually do that. And this roadblock was came about as a result of actually overconfidence that this was easy to solve. I had worked for a brief period at Polaroid and had access to their sonar sensing, and so I figured that, all right, we'll put a sonar sensor at the top of the weight stack, a load cell on the bottom of the weight stack. The sonar would see how quickly and how far it's getting lifted. The load cell is going to measure how much weight comes off, so we'll know the weight and the location at any given time. From that, you can derive everything you need to know to be a personal trainer. You can do lift speed, range of motion, count reps, to track the weight, and so on. Everything other than kind of seeing form. But if you control the stack properly, you can do all of that. And as a bonus, we get to collect the data at the end. The challenge was, and this is my partner here wiring up a weight stack and putting a load cell at the bottom. The challenge is we budgeted about a week for this. It was obvious to us that this was going to work. This wasn't going to be a challenge. This wasn't the hard part of the startup. It turns out that if you drop a lot of weight on a load cell, it tends to break, and sonar can't keep up with the speed of a lifted weight at enough resolution for us to pull it off. So our first idea went out the window. Then our second sensor idea literally went up in smokes, and we stopped taking pictures of our ideas because it was clearly causing the bad luck. And eventually, the thing I would say about that point, having worked briefly at some corporations, each one of those setbacks would have been weeks-long bureaucratic postmortems and solutions to solve, and maybe like, oh boy, 2 times this thing can't work, and let's scrap the project. They're behind budget, they're over time, and so forth. As a startup, instead we, hopped on a train, went to Philadelphia to a sensor trade show, loaded up our pockets with everything that existed that might possibly sense a weight stack, and just kept persisting and persisting until finally we came up with something that was worlds better than our initial idea. It was a non-contact, the details aren't important, but these are actually patents that we got on the idea for doing non-contact sensing with optical sensors and rotary encoders. And to this day now, some 25 plus years later, this design I'm finding is still in use at certain facilities around the world because it's that robust. And it proved to be one of our great competitive advantages. So by being, kind of continuously scrappy and innovative and just working and not giving up and saying we can't declare failure until the physics say it won't work, which is one of the way Elon Musk talks about, don't give up until the physics tell me it's impossible. And we persevered and came up with something better for having gone through the challenge of that. As with everything, someone has a better quote than I can explain it. And Edison, in talking about the light bulb and not giving up on all his various filament tests, is that many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. So that's kind of lesson number one that I would derive and generalize, is that David has the advantage of being nimble and being able to overcome obstacles because you and maybe your partner or your small team gets to just decide that it's not time to give up and just move on to the next thing without a lot of PowerPoint presentations and convincing a bureaucracy to come along. Goliaths are methodical and risk averse. People working at Goliaths are more afraid of getting something wrong than they are excited about getting something right. The rewards are very different in a big company often than they are in a startup. And so, use that knowledge to your advantage. And while they might have infinitely more resource, your speed and perseverance is an advantage for David. So story two. Second roadblock we hit is kind of what to build. I'll describe it as, meaning that we were two guys who we were not industry insiders by any means. We were two guys who sometimes went to health clubs, and not by any means industry experts, not fitness experts. We were consumers of these products who knew something about technology and a little bit about business and brought our background, but nothing that would be considered an insider. Goliath, by contrast, knew, and I'll put "knew" in quotes, they knew what to build. And the asterisk there is that they thought they knew what to build. But Goliath, being that they come from the industry and they had created the life cycle and they'd been the first to computerize equipment of any type, rapidly moved to the stage of saying, okay, what worked for us on the cardio equipment, we're just going to move over to the strength equipment. Grid of LEDs, a few protocols, an interesting variable resistance, nice design, have it all look the same, and we're off and running. And I wasn't obviously inside the room on their end on user testing, but I imagine not a lot of user testing was done, certainly not diverse user testing, where being the outsiders and not knowing quite what to build, we had the opposite approach out of necessity. The book Lean Startup and Sprints and Extreme Programming, those weren't published yet, so we were making this up on our own, but that's kind of what you would call it in retrospect. What we did instead, since we didn't know or think we knew, is enlist about 50 friends and family into mom's basement gym. So we computerized a bunch of equipment in a basement, got 50 diverse users of all ages, genders, backgrounds, fitness experiences to come join the gym and come work out with us a few times a week. My partner, Andy, would watch them exercise during the day using the latest version of our software. We had computer touchscreens that were just coming out then. It was the beginning of the touchscreens. We opened up, took the hoods off the computer, wired them up to the strength equipment so that we could put software in that would simulate what would eventually become our console. And he would watch over their shoulders as they used the equipment and see where they'd stumble. He'd take notes and watch what they're doing and kind of rather than telling them what to do, just seeing if they could figure it out. And from that, we learned what different types of users were looking for, what they wanted, what would confuse them, what would work well. And we kept baking in new versions of it. And I know, the current models and thinking about a sprint, or that it's maybe once every week or two, you collect feedback and then you do a version. Fortunately, we didn't read that. It didn't exist at that point because we were doing this in 24-hour cycles. And that's also what I would encourage you to do as a startup as well. You can throw away the textbook and just operate as quickly as you possibly can, because it's number of iterations that matters, not the calendar time that passes. So he would collect data during the day, watching them exercise. We'd meet in the afternoon. I would write a new version of software overnight. I was the night owl, he was the morning guy, and I leave him a floppy disk, for those who haven't seen these, by his door in the morning, and he would go down and try it the next day. And so we did, over the course of about 3-4 months, did about 100 versions of the software, getting it better and better and better. Making sure it worked for our 70-something-year-old woman who was using fitness equipment for the first time, all the way to the strength coach for the New York Knicks, who was one of our test users, and everyone in between. And we created something that was infinitely flexible and very user-friendly. And while Life Fitness had this grid of LEDs, we came out with, and mind you, this is like pre-iPad, pre-tablet, pre-touchscreen phone. We came out with a touchscreen device that we had custom manufactured for us because we needed that level of flexibility. And it was vastly superior to what Life Fitness was delivering in terms of user experience. Our users loved it. They used it once and couldn't get enough. They wanted to keep coming back. And their users, it was like another device, and maybe people would go use the Cybex equipment or their stuff. It didn't matter much. And that then led to us adding on eventually an internet portal for that, so you can check your results inside or outside the club. And anytime we'd go into head-to-head competition with them, our user experience would win out. And so we created, considering that they had all the assets in the world, millions of users of their equipment, experts on staff, infinite capability and infinite depth, they failed to get the user experience right. And the scrappy new startup who watched customers and asked them what they wanted and observed them, outmaneuvered on creating a better product on far less resource. And so again, quoting someone who says it better, founder of IDEO, innovative designs come from empathizing with the end user through observing them. So for whatever market you're going into, if you're touching a consumer, or even if it's B2B, understand your customer. And often you're going into a space because you understand it as the customer would. So the David advantage here is to iterate rapidly, uncover and solve the customer needs, while Goliaths surprisingly often think they know. Now, some Goliaths are smarter than that, and they go out and do their user testing as well, but you'd be surprised how many think innovation is just doing a step over from what they already do, and you can take them on in a new category. And then the other lesson in there is fast and focused. So Goliaths, if you've ever worked at a large company, it's bureaucratic, and your calendar is filled with meetings and follow-ups and explaining things and getting budget for what you need and so forth. Davids have the advantage. You get your team together. Maybe it's just you, maybe it's you and a partner, a few people, and you can make a decision in a minute and move on to the decision and move quickly. So use that speed to your advantage. They've got the money, they've got the resources, they've got the personnel, but you've got speed and nimbleness is adequate often to win the day. Third of 3 lessons, and I could have many more in different ones, but just picking a few of them here is getting to market. So if you picture now, we're in the basement, have a sort of superior user experience that when we show it to people, they tend to like it, but we have no distribution capability into what's going to be a B2B market. So how do you get a product out into market that has established change of distribution? We don't have the money to go spend on a massive distribution campaign, hire a big sales force or anything like that, and get global recognition, let alone the marketing that Life Fitness is able to do. So Life Fitness is sitting there, we can outmarket you, put you out of business, whatever. We don't need the better product. And often that can be true. Goliath can often win with an inferior product because they've got superior distribution. So we needed to be scrappy on distribution as well. And so for this one, we actually looked to a different industry, not the fitness industry, but saw that, Intel Inside was a popular campaign at the time. And the idea was that Intel would get any of the computer manufacturers that were using their devices, they'd give them a discount in exchange for co-marketing. And it got the Intel brand name out there because it wasn't a commonly known brand, even though it was the engine of all these computers. And so we thought, like, okay, that sounds great. We're just going to do the same thing and go FitLink certified. So we'll let any equipment manufacturer go put our logo on their stuff, and they can then use our tech. And the conversation with a typical CEO of a fitness company at the time that I would have, I'd call up or visited a trade show. Paul Byrne, head of Precor, and kind of say, hey, Paul. We think it's a great idea for you to put the FitLinks logo on all your Precor equipment, advertise the fact that we can collect data for you and people can put it on the, see their results and graphs and reports. And his response was sort of, yeah, that sounds like a great idea for you. Why is that helpful to me exactly, right? We don't need that. That's not our category. It's not our space. And on it went down the list of Cybex and Bodymaster and all these players who thought that was cute idea, nice technology, guys. If you want to either, give it to us to do and sell your company to us for next to nothing because you don't have much distribution, or pay us to market for you, we could do that. But it's, I don't know why we would do this for ourselves. But then interestingly, what happened next was, again, the story of David and Goliath, and don't be scared of their marketing might, because what happened was Life Fitness starts marketing the heck out of their Life Center. The strategy at Life Fitness for this thing was that every time they get a Life Center into a fitness center, whether it's a hospital or a YMCA or a health club, then that center is likely to only buy Life Fitness equipment forevermore. Their goal was that the Life Center would be sort of a Trojan horse, that once we lock the software up, the software provision up, we're going to get all the hardware to follow. And they weren't wrong. Every time they get a YMCA or a health club to do it, they'd have a very unfair advantage to keep Cybex and Bodymaster and Life Fit and Precor and others out of the facility. And they quickly, what ended up happening is they revealed to the industry that this was their primary strategy. So not only were we David in the product line of Goliath, we were David in the primary strategy of Goliath. And they start blasting this out, advertising Life Center. It's the cover of magazines, the back cover of magazines, the center of the trade show focus. And what that ended up doing, as you might surmise, is create a lane for us. All of a sudden, all of their competitors who did not have this technology were starting to lose accounts to Life Fitness and needed us to bring us into to be able to, when they were competing with a Life Center, say that, hey, we have a solution too. And so, about a year later, after all those initial calls went nowhere, I'd start getting calls back from people like Paul, and they'd say, hey, remember that conversation we had? I think we're interested now. And within, rapidly, within months of Life Fitness really pressing this, we quickly became the industry standard for everyone else. So the trade show view of this is, and trade shows were super important in the fitness industry at the time, still are, is that you're walking around, still Life Fitness is the big center of the booth. Their booth is the big center of the trade show. But then every other booth surrounding them has this FitLinks powered, this little FitLinks kiosk and a FitLinks certified logo in there. And pretty soon, because we had a superior user experience and now distribution, we were winning more deals than Life Fitness. So, and the PS to this story for Goliath is now their own strategy was backfiring on them. We were now, when we would get into an account, they would get none of the business. And so we were actually a major problem for them, to the point that about a year after that, by 1997, so we entered the market in 1995 after being at a show in 93, 2 years after our entry, Augie called me up and had us out to his Chicago headquarters before the next big industry trade show, and said, the conversation was basically, first it was like, hey, we think we'd like to buy you. And we said that we're not really interested, certainly not at that price. And then he said, well, you either need to get bought or we're going to just deploy a lot of resources on this and we'll put you out of business. And we said, well, it seems like every time you put resources into this, it helps us. So, kind of, I kept a poker face and said, keep doing that. It obviously gets me concerned when they say they're going to spend a lot of money. But then finally, his last offer, like 2 days before the show, was, how about this? How about we pull our competing product out of the market and we become compatible with you too? So we stop losing sales to you. And the day before the next big industry show, they wheeled their competing product out of their trade show booth, signed a deal with us, and we were the industry standard for 80% of the equipment sold in the industry. There was another competing Italian standard called Technogen. And with that, the business just took off, as you can imagine. We were in the business press. We were in the trade show, the trade industry press. We raised tens of millions of dollars of venture capital. We did a major rollout with the U.S. Air Force, covering the entire Pacific Air Force. We did a major rollout with the largest player in the rehabilitation space and the physical therapy space to do a step down program. And we actually reached number 20 on the Deloitte Fast 500, which was pretty remarkable from a little sleepy niche of the fitness industry. And so, there's obviously a lot of ups and downs along the way, and I'm telling the short version where it's all the good parts. There are plenty of bad parts too. So it was a rapid ride by the time we, by the time Life Fitness kind of conceded the category to us. But our growth was fueled by them being there. We would not have been able to grow this quickly had they not been a competitor. The idea of stealing our distribution model from someplace out of the fitness industry is to say, always steal great ideas. Steve Jobs puts it best. We've always been shameless about stealing great ideas that might be slightly misattributed. But the takeaway I'd give you is to be a student of other industries. Often, going back to the biblical story, David changed the rules. Had he gone into hand-to-hand combat with Goliath, he'd be dead. But by standing back, dozens of meters, hundreds of meters, and slinging a stone, he changed the rules of the battle and persevered and actually had the advantage. Often the rules of the game that you might need to bring to your startup come from industries outside of the industry you're going to compete in, but they're out there already. So one great thing to do for any entrepreneur that I always suggest is just be a student of industry and industries. Listen to pods about startups and get your ideas from other places, because you need to often change the rules of the game to go compete with a Goliath. And then I'm going to throw in a bonus one, because this is and then I'm going to open up to questions if you have any. But I'll tell you that I always like to leave the story on a high, and I'd love to leave it right there. But the PS on this is that the industry, the internet bubble comes along. We got a lot of funding, and then it all went away. We added a website to the thing. We had a chart mapped out for winning the B2B space. We ended up merging with a wearables company that put the sensor in the Nike sneaker, so it sounded really attractive. And then at a board level investor decision, which I don't disagree with, was to pursue the wearables as our primary category. Since my product line was the B2B product, I went on and started my next startup at that point, but obviously had a rooting interest in the success of the company for a long time thereafter. And I'll show you exactly what happens to even a successful startup that became the Goliath in the category. So going after the wearables category, we had every advantage. We had over 1 million users in the fitness center market who were using our product. We could have gotten them to use our wearables, collect the data, and so forth. And we had this group of brilliant engineers who had done this as a third party, done the sensor for the Nike sneaker, so thought we knew how to do it. And the team ended up creating a very accurate sensor, this device over on the left attached to a sneaker, which was the imperative for the Nike product. And as you might guess as a preview, the accuracy turns out not to be the primary feature of interest to most consumers. That's good for the elite couple percent. But if you don't go out and ask users what they want, it turns out that those, a scrappy David who does, might win the category. And so in our, I had left by this point, but in our second product line, which was going to be a wearables, a scrappy startup named Fitbit got it right and realized that, plus or minus 5%, the average consumer doesn't really care, but make something that's more user friendly, more fun, more wearable, and you can win the category. And so we were clearly out navigated by, I'll say my successors, were clearly out navigated by a company that did exactly what FitLinks did in the basement, which was track what users really wanted and deliver a product that the industry wants. And so, Goliaths routinely become, Davids routinely become the Goliaths and get it wrong their second time. And so that can, again, give you some confidence in going up against a company that even got it right recently. And it's well documented in Innovator's Dilemma on not being able to kind of pivot to the next thing. So, ultimately, David's odds are excellent as long as you recognize and exploit the advantages and Goliath's weaknesses. So don't go toe to toe. Don't go up close to a Goliath who's much bigger than you and fight their battle. Fight it in a different way. Come at it from a different angle. If you don't have a different angle, it's probably not a fight worth doing. So I wouldn't just advocate like blindly go after Goliath. It's got to be because you're seeing the industry in a different way, or going to come at it in some different way. And just in closing, to all of you who are entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, I now advise entrepreneurs, so I'm no longer quite in the arena. But my hat's off to you, and you're who we all celebrate at Techstars every day, because we tell ourselves and our mentors that it's not the critics who count. The credit belongs to those who are in the arena, and so on. And Teddy Roosevelt says it much better. So my hat goes off to all you entrepreneurs and all you who are potentially willing to go be David in a fight with a Goliath and make an industry better and solve a problem that we need solving in a new and innovative way. And at Techstars, we're all here to support that. That's our mission, and our goal is to support founders all across the world, and believe that founders create a better future. So happy to take questions on anything I presented or anything else about startups, about Techstars, about whatever you're interested in.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation. And if you're watching on Facebook, feel free to send questions through Messenger, the same for YouTube and for Twitter. And if you're watching on LinkedIn, you can write us on my personal LinkedIn through the Street Entrepreneurs page. So let me just kind of start from the top and see one of the most common kind of reoccurring questions I've been seeing is, have times changed, right? Is the data and capital disparity too big to tackle?
Oh, I think times have gotten better for startups. Like the access to things that didn't have names back then are now common and available. Like if I had I wish I had a Techstars that I could have gone to. I would have had access to mentorship. I would have avoided a bunch of mistakes that I didn't cover, saved a couple years on picking the wrong vertical market first, a whole bunch of things. And back then it was like, hey, go find your own mentor network. Now there's actually structured ways to go get mentorship. There's friends and the pre-seed is now a thing, right? It's got a name. Like before, it used to be like go find someone who write a check for you. There's now actually people like us who play in the space of pre-seed investing, invest $120,000 in a company that doesn't have a lot of traction yet, and it's an institutional process, and there are methods for it. So I would say that David's with a good idea and a little bit of traction and a great team. That it's really key to be a strong founding team and have some reason why you individually should be back, have a lot of wind at their backs that didn't used to exist. So I think a lot of barriers are actually getting broken down, and there's a lot more ability to get to market where it used to be really quite challenging.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Now, specifically when it comes to data, how do you tackle companies that have spent years hoarding data like Facebook and beyond?
Again, so to generalize the question, so if data is the core to what you're going to do, and a Goliath has an advantage directly in the thing that you want to do, and it's their core business, you might not have a big advantage there. Like I wouldn't just go, again, I wouldn't go toe to toe with David up close in a grapple match. Like I do it from a distance with a stone, right? So unless you can think of some different angle of what you're going to do to have a different cut of data or to use data differently or something like that, I wouldn't just go toe to toe with Goliath. It's a matter of finding some niche or something that they might not be exploiting well. So yeah, I mean, so like examples are things like, not all data is covered. Maybe user data is well covered, but there's a great example of a company that was trying to figure out what's a weed. This is a story in the AI professor from Stanford, whose name is escaping me. But if you do his online MOOC class, it's a great class, and he talks about the company that attaches on a camera to a tractor to be able to start telling if something is a weed or it's a lettuce. I don't remember what they were looking for. And weed versus lettuce, they end up visually doing it and then building AI models for it, and then eventually have the biggest database of weeds versus lettuce in the world. And that creates a virtuous cycle, because once they're better at it, then everyone else wants to use their camera, and they end up selling several years later to Caterpillar for $300 million because they've got a proprietary data store. So yeah, I wouldn't compete with a Goliath of a Facebook or an Amazon in their core business, but there's other angles to do something different.
And this kind of ties into the next question. So how do you change the rules for battle? Are there industries that are impossible to penetrate? For instance, the e-commerce industry and Amazon.
Again, so I wouldn't go. Maybe so that's the if I knew, I would join you in the startup. So you have to figure that out, right? So that's the question: is how do you what do you see uniquely and differently about that, or where can you apply it differently, or is there a niche, or is there like I know of a company that we invested in up in Canada who was the so looking at Amazon as the Goliath for quick delivery. All of a sudden there are a bunch of other e-commerce players who need delivery, but they can't each in a splintered way provide that. So we have a company that we've invested in that can be the third-party delivery solution for splintered e-commerce players who can't compete with the quick delivery that Amazon can do. And by aggregating that demand, they're able to get to market and support a number of companies as the alternative, because Amazon's not going to get 100%. So I think you got to find ways where you can redefine the rules. Where do you see a different approach than what they're doing? And again, if I saw one, I'd go start it. But so that's your your unique angle, and do it whether it's do it as a customer, right? Like do it like find a gap of something that you wish the market had that isn't there, or something that you could do 10x better than is happening today. Don't just see what's happening and say, yeah, I think I want to do that too. Like that's not a disruptive startup. Think of something that you wish you had or thought could be done fundamentally differently.
Yeah, and for some of the examples that you have given, and this kind of ties into another question, a critical piece of it has been patents, right? Or yet another example, how Bill Gates was able to take IBM, right? So intellectual property is key. Now, if you can't afford intellectual property, and you can't take months off at a time to join a Techstars, and you don't have wealthy friends and family you can ask for $10,000, let alone $1,000, I said that backwards, but you get
$1 million.
Yeah. So what do you do? Like,
yeah, I mean, well, obviously, if you're going to do a startup, you got to do one that can fit into what your time and budget availability is. And the tools for starting a company now are more accessible and available than ever before with cloud storage, and you don't need to, and software tools and so forth. And getting a team of people who will, be willing to work part-time to demonstrate an idea, and eventually you may be. Part of the idea of Techstars is we provide some funding so you can afford to take a few months off, right? Like so some people would use that funding to say, like, all right, I'm ready to jump in full time if I get in. And so that might be so maybe it's a side gig for a while you're trying to prove out if it's, a little bit of a side hustle for 10 hours a week while you're trying to solve it. And then eventually you go, hey, this actually could be something. Let me apply. And if you get in, now you've got the 120 grand to go take some time off and see if you can really get to that next round of funding. But I don't know if I answered the question, but that's, that's kind of the play. It's like it's less, it's less expensive than ever to start a company. It used to be the rule of thumb was like, hey, it takes $1 million to start a company. That's not necessarily the thing anymore. You asked about IP. I'll say I have 4 patents, 2 in each of my 2 companies, and in no case were they helpful, but they're really cool, right? So they were helpful in terms of marketing, because we could say patented technology, but actually the thing that differentiated us and the thing that protected us was our software. So all the smarts was always in the software. That's not going to be true of every industry. There might be some real technological breakthrough stuff where your IP is your patent. But in many things, I see it's more about your scrappiness and your software and the intelligence in the software that would be hard to copy because it's algorithms and not things that would be easy to solve.
Yes. And that's kind of another question. Like, what if you can't afford to defend your IP, right? You have it, but you can't defend it. So what's the purpose of it?
Exactly, and that's really that's kind of the facts of all patents, right? Like, so it costs tens of thousands of dollars to get a patent. It costs millions of dollars to defend the patent. So it's like, what are you really going to do with it? It's an asset in an eventual acquisition by a bigger company. They might want to check the protectability of the patents because it might be important to them. But for most startups, boy, if you're actually getting into patent litigation, no one's going to have the assets for that.
You're done before you even start.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So how do you know if you need to raise money?
Well, so good question. That's a whole other presentation. But and by way of example, like one of my other stories is that my second company was a keep it small, own it all, right? So we bootstrapped it, self-funded it, and by way of going to market as a franchise system, we used customer financing as opposed to investor financing. And there's all sorts of examples of that, whether it's a Kickstarter campaign or whatever. It's like have a good idea and go, sell it aggressively and then catch up with your demand. The decision to not raise capital for that was in part like a reaction to, hey, it was really interesting to do this wild venture ride and raise $50 million and have infinite resources. And there's a lot of dilution. There's a lot of people sitting on the board. There's a lot of liquidation preferences, another thing that comes out in your cap tables. So it's also interesting to be able to keep it all and not raise anything. And so if you can actually solve for doing that, go for it. Often the decision to raise can come in a few different forms. A couple of them that I see are, you raise because you need to. So you have a good idea, you're getting some traction, and in order to bring on the people you need or to build the inventory or whatever else, you need the capital. There's no other way to do it. The other is that you can be doing well and potentially, I'm advising one company that could probably get there without raising any capital, but it's almost an arms race right now in their industry. And so, if they don't raise capital, then someone who even has a lesser product who does raise the capital might leapfrog them. So sometimes it can get that, you can get to that level in certain industries, so that one might cause you to say like, hey, even though I don't need it and don't really even necessarily want it, I probably have to be a player in this category. So there's all different reasons, but usually the first one is I need to raise it because otherwise I can't do my next step.
So let's say a company could potentially get the capital they need to grow their business with pre-purchases or to develop new technology with pre-purchases, but they're afraid to put it out there. What would you say in that instance? Would it be worthy to just raise the money just to secure it, right? Secure in case you need to go into an arms race, you're ready. Or
in other words, if you have a product that you think you can sell and raise the money through customer and sales, should you raise the capital instead?
I'm kind of paraphrasing this question. Yeah. Okay. So if you're watching and I didn't do justice to your question, feel free to write me. But I think it was a long one. So in a nutshell, I guess what they were saying is I could raise the money I need to build my product through pre-purchases. However, I'm afraid to put the idea out there because it would give my competitors an advantage. And since my competitors have capital, they could very easily deploy my idea. I think that's what this person is feeling.
Got it. Yeah. So devil's in the details, and any advice is any advice is just one piece of input. I'd say that the typical feedback I see from mentors when questions like this get raised generally, and so it's not specific to the questioner's specific situations. I give all those caveats up front, but usually go get the sales because A, you're going to learn a lot. B, you're going to validate and get much better pricing on your valuation, raising capital. And C, the competitor probably is pretty busy too, and you'd be surprised at how weak competitors actually are at ripping off ideas. So the notion here is that ideas are cheap and execution is really important. So if you can be, focused and scrappy and quick to market, and you've got a product idea, run hard at it without too much concern that someone's going to, rip it off and do it, because, most people who would be good at that already have day jobs and they're busy doing other stuff and they've got meetings and things, and the people who would be bad at it aren't going to do it well anyway. So if you think you can do it pretty well, go out and get the sales and get the growth flywheel going, and then investors will be even more interested in you as opposed to holding it back, and go get that customer validation and do those quick cycles. I could be wrong for the questioner specific thing, like maybe it's a very IP centric thing and the competitor is thinking about exactly that. So there's always, but in general, that would be the advice: go get the sales.
Awesome. And what are some of the downsides to raising investment capital? So you mentioned speed. Like if you want to take it slow or slower, then should you raise investment capital?
Well, I think you should be fast no matter what. So like a core advantage of David's and startups is speed, so do everything quickly, iterate quickly, get feedback quickly, move quickly, get to market quickly. Like speed is your advantage compared to plotting Goliath. So capital can speed you up because it lets you hire those resources that you don't have in-house, or contract them, or try a distribution channel or whatever it might be. Raising capital itself is time consuming. So we advise a CEO to have a team able to run their company for a good 6 months while they're out busy raising the round. It doesn't come together quickly. You'll end up with board members and additional people having a say in the business, which should be an asset, right? Like having an interested board member investor is definitely an advantage, and another person who's fighting for you. But it is more meetings and more reporting and more potential for things to go a different direction. So there's and you're also setting yourself up on a trajectory where some kind of exit event might be important, right? So the investors are investing because they want a return on that investment. So that means somewhere at the end of this story, you're selling your business, or maybe going public, or providing liquidity in some way. Or if you have a business that you just are in love with and want to operate for the next 20 years as a so-called lifestyle business, you shouldn't take outside investment, or at least go in with the investor feeling the same way about maybe just getting dividends. So there's all sorts of reasons not to raise if you can avoid it.
Awesome. And have you ever seen speed be a detriment to the business with particular startups?
Well, I mean, sloppy would be bad. So if by speed you mean like, hey, I'm going to do things in a negligent way and cut corners and stuff, then that's not positive. But I can't come up with any example where moving, so if you mean like move slow to be, if it's quality versus speed, then I understand the question. If it's just like, hey, if I could do the same thing slower or faster, which would I prefer? I mean, speed, fast. Yeah.
And I guess I'm also thinking about the mental well-being of founders.
Yes.
Who wind up in the hospital.
Don't do that. Yeah, that's the right question. It's not speed at all costs, right? It's not speed to the point. You're running a marathon. if you're running a startup will be a marathon. Like there's no way around it. And so if you're running your marathon as a sprint, you're going to end up unhealthy. So you gotta do the self-care. You gotta decompress. You gotta figure out your own way of decompressing. You need to track sleep patterns. You've got to do all the right things to take care of your health, wellness, mental, physical, and so forth. So just be very cognizant of that and have others who can check in with you. I'm not a mental health professional. We have mental health professionals. We have advised some of our company, but it's super important thing.
How do you set the boundary with your investors to say, I'm going as fast as I humanly can, and any more pressure will just crumble the startup and the founder? Like how did you set the boundary with your investors to say, listen, this is what we can deliver and by when, without being sloppy and without, just completely having 100% turnout on this company?
So if you have the right, I'll tell you two pieces. I'm going to tell you about two of my investors who were phenomenal, two venture capitalists who've been doing it for a long time. The pressure of speed was more by me than by them, to the point that my comment on "this is a marathon, not a sprint" was a quote from one of my venture capitalists who says, "You got to stop this. You're sending me emails too late at night. You're going to burn out." And I'm like, "But Peter, we're up here. It's like, this is a marathon. You are not going to sprint to the finish line here." And so I think that often that'll be self-imposed, not investor-imposed. And the second thing is part of that is getting the right investors from the beginning. So if you are raising capital, it's not just money. This is someone who's going to be a partner in your business in many regards, and be someone who you want to be on the same page with and that you understand well. And you should reference check them heavily, just like they're reference checking you. And in fact, I had the third person who came to the trade show with me, Gus Ty. Shout out to Gus. It was a longtime venture capitalist at Trinity Ventures, and his firm was part of my Series A, and we had a co-lead in our Series A. And I said, "But Gus, I don't know this guy. How do I know that it won't be that type of relationship?" And he said, "Ask for a list of every CEO he's ever invested in, and that you want to call them all." And I said, "Gus, that's a little presumptuous. I'm asking the guy for money. How can I really reference check? He's reference checking me. Should I reference check him?" He's like, "If he's any good, he'll not only give you the list, but he'll thank you for asking." And so I'm like, and so I call up Steve and I say, "Yeah, thanks for thinking about the term sheet. I know you're doing due diligence. Can I get a list of all the CEOs you've ever invested in? I'd like to do some due diligence on you too." And I'm like half waiting for him to yell at me. And he said, "I am so happy you asked. I am delighted that you're worried about those sorts of things. I will get you a list tomorrow, and I would love you to call them all because I want you to hear the good, bad, and ugly of working with me." And I go down and I start calling them, and they love him, right? And so it played out for the next he was working with us for 6 years, I don't know, through a lot of good, bad, and ugly, and such an asset to the business. And what I heard from those people he invested in before absolutely played out. And by the way, someone who has had rocky relationships with the CEOs before might not give you the list, and you should run away. So it's so that's the how to avoid like a investor. You could have investor conflict anyway, but how to avoid having someone who's going to like put your mental health at risk is like find out what they're really like in the heat of battle.
Yeah, honestly, I've seen that. I've seen that happen quite a bit. So what do you remember what other questions you asked?
What's that?
Do you remember what other questions you asked?
What I asked?
Yeah.
Of the founder, of the CEOs?
To the investor. What?
Oh no, that was it. I basically wanted. I basically wanted his reference list. So I said, I didn't ask him. I wanted to know from the CEOs he had invested in, and so he gave me the list, and I went down, founder by founder, and said, "Hey, Steve said I could get in touch with you. Just love to hear what it's like working with them. Tell me about the background of working with them. Tell me about a time where you hit a challenge in your business and how did he react? just get story after story of, oh, he stood with the company, he was, hard but fair, and those are the types of things you want to hear. You don't want to hear, someone's not going to just blindly give you their money and not execute their fiduciary responsibility, but you want to hear that they will push you in the right ways, not micromanage and get into the details and the weeds and think that they're your VP of marketing. You want them to, give you strategic insight and advice and hold you accountable and support you. And so that's what I heard story after story.
That's awesome. What is the biggest mistakes you see entrepreneurs make?
Oh gosh, I mean, I could, it's so, there's a litany in just my own background, let alone generalizing. I mean, so I'd say that, starting from the top, I mean, you could go into a business that you don't know enough about, right? Let's say you want to have an idea that you've validated. You could do insufficient customer discovery before you just invest a lot of time and effort in a solution. You might get together with co-founders who you don't really end up getting on well with, or haven't successfully set the rules of engagement properly. As things start rolling, a common mistake is to pursue, often you'll have multiple choices of what market to go after with a solution. And often I see entrepreneurs jumping at the first one that'll pay them, as opposed to doing an analysis of what the right one ought to be, or being too broad and spreading too thin and chasing all the customers who come, even if they don't have a coherent vertical to go after, and there's not enough time or energy to do too many. So that's certainly a mistake that I made, is chasing the wrong vertical market first without doing enough due diligence. In fact, so the quick sidelight story there of chasing the wrong vertical, I mentioned that we had the strength coach of the Knicks as one of our test users. After coming for a few weeks, he said, if you can get this thing cleaned up and get it out of pilot and into production, I'd like the Knicks to buy this. And we ended up with our first paying customer was the well, it turned out not paying customer, but promotional customer was the New York Knicks basketball team back when they were good. So Patrick Ewing was a user of our stuff, for those who follow local DC sports in Georgetown. But it was absolutely, it was exciting. It was like someone with that prestige wanted our product. But any rational analysis, if we had stepped back for a minute and done some market research, was that the pro sports market is tiny. How many fitness centers do pro sports teams have compared to all these other verticals? And so we ended up successfully entering a market that wasn't going to get us anywhere for lack of doing the analysis. So, being wise about your verticals and so forth are all useful. And then maybe my meta suggestion is the biggest mistake might be to not get mentorship. And that's kind of a shout out to why I'm at Techstars, because the last time I worked for someone was in 1993 before joining Techstars. And so I've been here for a few years now. I joined because Techstars brilliantly supplies mentorship to startups. So we surround every program of 10 companies with 100 mentors who come in, and these are all seasoned entrepreneurs or marketing experts or finance experts who listen to what you're doing and suggest a lot of things. And it might be disparate feedback, it might be contradictory, but at least you're getting hit with a lot of things so that you can avoid mistakes that people have made before. And so I'd say just, plowing ahead without that mentorship, whether it's from an accelerator or from anyone you can find, would be a mistake. And that's the meta version, is your mistake is to not notice that you can avoid these mistakes that everyone's made before. So hopefully that answers a little bit of it.
Yeah, definitely. And what about the biggest mistakes you see Davids make?
Well, so same thing, so the David thing, as a David, in addition to all the other startup mistakes that you can make, and getting anything else wrong, David just going toe-to-toe Goliath and fighting Goliath in their own battle would be a mistake. I mean, then you'll just get crushed. Like if David actually had come to Goliath, he would have been fed to the birds in the field, right? So you don't take Goliath on in their own industry, in their own, you don't want to be an also-ran to someone who's already good. You don't want to be the number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 player in a crowded market. That's just noise. So in addition to all the other things you have to get right as a startup, you have to have a different angle, a different view, a different come up with ways that you can play the game differently to succeed as David. And then if you do, don't be scared. Like go for it.
So I know you've already been generous enough to share some of your mistakes, but what were some of the mistakes you made as a David, in addition to the ones you've already mentioned?
Yeah, no, certainly, from the outset, the biggest one at first by far was wrong market selection, and we not only did it once, we did it twice. So let me tell you how bad. So this is and this was pre having board. So this is again an advantage of having good investors, and we did not have investors at this point. But the advantage of good investors who will step back with you once a month or once a quarter and really ask questions in a removed board of directors sort of way and say, why are you doing that, right? Like where you often you don't want to slow down, so you want to move quickly and not ask all these why questions. But sometimes it's good to have someone who's not in the day-to-day step back and say, well, did you think about that deeply? And you're like, I don't have time to think about it deeply. I got to go execute. And they're like, well, then you're about to make a years-long decision on what market to go after. Maybe you should do a little analysis first, right? And so twice we didn't do this. So first we went with the Knicks, and then which was it was fun. We got tickets and it was good credibility. But then when we realized like, hey, we're not going to keep getting sports teams, and even if we do, they're not going to pay us. They're just going to give us tickets, and that's no way to pay the bills. We then pivoted to say, all right, we got to go after the commercial club space. Because clearly health clubs is the big giant market in the industry, and we've got something that users seem to like, so let's go after clubs. And so we started showing up to health club trade shows and such, and we didn't get a lot of traction, and it was very frustrating, and could have theoretically thrown in the towel there because it was moving very slowly. But health clubs didn't really want what we were selling. They wanted member attraction, and they didn't really care about retaining the members long. I'm overgeneralizing, but they didn't care if people didn't show up, 3 times a week. And our product was very helpful with retention, and keeping people engaged on their program and showing up. And so it was a mismatch, and we were overpriced for them. And then we got lucky that our third vertical was YMCAs, and we got lucky because Life Fitness was starting to sell the Ys. And Ys would come comparison shop with us, and we'd have the better products. So we ended up realizing that our path to market was this segment that was 10% as big as the commercial club market, but wanted exactly what we were selling. They were looking to support beginning exercisers, seniors, ready to be fit customers in a special room for starting. And what we had was perfect for them, and we had the better product. And had we done the analysis and really done some market research, we would have figured that out and saved a year. So it was a really painful period. So we got it wrong not once but twice. But so that's another example. Measuring the wrong KPIs is a good one. Like, happy talk about like, hey, this is working. Look at all this pipeline. It's like, yeah, but are they converting? There's plenty to get wrong.
How do you keep from becoming Goliath as you scale, or is it inevitable? Do you have to let go of your nimbleness at some point for process?
I think being aware of it will help you avoid it. So the innovator's dilemma is like kind of the classic text on like, as you are Goliath, like for being Goliath in your core category, someone probably, if you're really winning it, it's hard to take you on. So it would have been hard for someone to enter our core business of data collection and fitness centers as we were dominating it. But as we saw this ancillary category of wearables and said, hey, we're so smart, we can do that one too. And I always say after I left, but we're so smart, we're good at this that we can do that one too. We missed that one because of our Goliath type tendencies. But had we been, had someone said, hey, you're not doing the thing that made you good, and convinced us of that. If we had the board members, we had a different board by that point too. But if we had the board members that really challenged that decision and said, what homework have you done? You can help avoid these mistakes in second markets. And you look at examples of companies that do that. I mean, like I would never take on Amazon in anything because they think this way, right? Like everything, any new thing they want to do, they've got. I have a peer at Techstars who worked at Amazon for a period. Like they have the 2 pizza team, right? So if we're going to do something new, I want the team working on this not to be big and bureaucratic. I want you to be able to feed them with 2 pizzas and go treat it like a startup with nimble thinking. That's a Goliath who still is able to execute like David's in new categories. So not all Goliaths are easy to beat. I would not take on Amazon in any category they were entering. But most mid-sized Goliaths don't think that way. They rely on what got them there to get them to the next thing, and they can stumble. So it's a matter of being cognizant of your startup roots and keeping on deploying it that way.
Awesome. So I'm gonna just read 3 more questions, and this ones are from Liliana. So Liliana, please ask follow-ups if it doesn't cover it. So, any advice for people who don't want to go corporate? Someone not interested in selling stock in their company, at least in the first few years. The IP outlook wasn't entirely rosy, but does Techstars mentor those who want patents? Someone who has a product that isn't software, but is a physical product that a Goliath could very easily steal and distribute otherwise. And just, can we briefly talk about China? And how really your IP, even if you do have it, can't be protected internationally?
Yeah, so I mean, that sounds like a pretty detailed question around a specific circumstance. So I'm not sure I could generalize. Yeah. I'm happy if anyone, let me put out the general invite that if you've got, if you think you have a company that could be appropriate for an accelerator, I'm happy to have you, reach out to me and inquire, and I'll forward you along to our sourcing team who can kind of take a peek at that on whether or not there's a program within Techstars that could be interested. While we have a lot of programs that focus on software, we certainly have our share of hardware focus and deep tech and hard tech and energy tech and all sorts of other things. So there might be an accelerator that's a good fit for whatever this person is doing. And you can you can send to me directly. My email address is firstname.lastname@techstars.com, and I'll forward along your inquiry to our sourcing team to see if there might be a accelerator that could be a fit. IP questions, I mean, it's hard to know without knowing the details of the product. But yes, I think you should assume that. Yeah, I think a startup should assume that patent protection is not going to take them very far, right? Like it's going to be hard to defend your patents, the whole thing. So they're good to get because they might be valuable in an acquisition, and other mentors might have different advice on this. But I would say worth doing if you can, but don't count on it to be your protection.
Awesome. And I have another question, actually, specific about Techstars. So I am a single parent who has a tech startup. Do you have any programs that allow, I guess they're referring to people, being able to be a caretaker while they're attending a program like Techstars?
Absolutely. Well, so two pieces to that answer. One is that for the last 3+ years, we've had a program called Techstars Anywhere, which is specifically designed for people who can't relocate for the 3 months of program, and is especially well designed for people who are, whether it's family or inability to go to the location of an accelerator to go participate. And now, given the COVID situation, 100% of our accelerators are operating as Techstars Anywhere. So we're almost in full remote mode in, I think, every place right now except Korea, where we're able to meet with founders in person still. So we're sort of adept at being able to handle not being able to relocate. That said, the 3 months of program are pretty intense. So if you're not ready to keep a startup schedule, you might not get the value out of the program. I mean, our whole goal is to accelerate and achieve years worth of work in this condensed 3-month period with a lot of mentorship.
So what is the startup schedule?
So during an accelerator, our programs are broken down into basically 3 broad months. The first month is we call it's an intensive mentorship. So you might meet in a speed dating type format, you might meet 100 mentors who are associated with the program who know something about the vertical market. Like if you're in a program focused on sports tech or energy tech, you might get a bunch of mentors who know something specifically about that vertical industry. If you're just in a broad city program, you'll get mentors from that location. And you'll meet 100 different people, and you'll give them quick snippets of your company, and they'll give you quick advice, and they will have you rethink everything, right? And so you'll take whatever piece, they'll be contradictory, they'll be challenging, and so forth. And the idea here is to really rethink your go-to-market strategy, your product market fit, and so forth. The second month is to build and to reassess and to pivot if you need to, go build, get some customers, go get some pilots with a corporate sponsor. And then the third month is to get ready to kind of storytell out to the world, whether that's for fundraising or for pilots or for whatever. And that's roughly how it works. But those mentor meetings are intense, and you want to follow up afterwards. And then the month of building out and going and getting customers and getting traction on your KPIs is a lot of work. And then ultimately getting ready for investment.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to ask the last question. This one's mine. So I know you're really passionate about caregiving and caregiving technology. And I'm wondering, do you see any Davids in this space?
Oh yeah. So we have, so thank you for the segue about our program based in Washington, D.C. So I'm out in the burbs in Bethesda, and so this is all being operated virtually right now, but a program that would be based in D.C. if we were in in-person world is our Techstars longevity program in partnership with Pivotal Ventures, and it's all about caregiving and caretaking. And so we have 10 companies in there right now, and you can see the portfolio online. If you can see the press announcement of the companies that are in there if you search for Techstars longevity, it'll probably come up and you can see the press release. But I'm in fact working with a specific company in there that could be a real David for caregiving in communities and how we think about supporting seniors and aging in place. And they have it's called Neighbor Force, but the idea is that your neighbors can help be the supporting glue for seniors aging in place and help relieve adult children dealing with their parents and who need a little, not necessarily caregiving, but someone to check in and have a conversation and do some errands. And I think that can be a disruptive David in a category that's full of caregiving, but for a different angle. So I think we have 10 different companies ready to be David-like disruptors in caregiving right now.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. And for those of you who are watching this Street Entrepreneurs Workshop and are not familiar with our program, what we are is a first-stop shop. We focus on small business. And we have 8 cohorts in various areas, technology, handmade products, so on and so forth. Everything from consulting to I'm making fashion, right? We actually have a specific cohort for apparel. And then what we do is we funnel these companies that are looking to grow at very fast pace into specific accelerators that can take them further. And everyone else should be set to build a profitable company by completion of the program. It's a year-long program. We host workshops that are specific to a cohort. This workshop was specific for tech. And of course, anyone is welcome to attend. We share it within our program, but because we're live casting from Facebook for technology reasons, we get a lot of newcomers as well. So thank you so much, Keith, for being here. I'm gonna just end the broadcast if you can stick around for 1 minute.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot.